I thought a video might help. So, as I just said in my emails to you, I've been finding out a bit more about tracing back to where Toon gets all the ideas from. And if you go back to that 2022 paper that scared you, and then you go back to where it got the soot from in the upper atmosphere, this goes back to this 2008 Physics Today paper. And then if you look at that paper where it got its ideas from, then the reason it thinks all the soot ends up in the upper atmosphere, ends back in research from 1983 by Toon, Carl Sagan and others. And then this I already knew in my nuclear winter debunk that you've already read. But the new thing that I hadn't realized, I just discovered just now, is that I knew it was a one-dimensional model, which means that they don't model any winds, and they can't because it's just one-dimensional, very, very simple model of the atmosphere. Everything is still, it's all vertical, and just all the atmosphere is absolutely identical above a single point. So how do they get the soot going up into the atmosphere in such a simple model without even winds? And this is what I hadn't realized before, is that what they do is they just look at soot and they say, well, if you've got some soot there, then the light from the sun and the near infrared will warm up the soot, they said, and then this will warm up the air around it. And then they said, as a result, the soot will just gradually rise up and up in the atmosphere and go up and up higher and higher. No winds needed. So if this was true, then on a completely calm day, the smoke from a fire should just go up and up and up and up and never stop until it reaches right up in the stratosphere. Because that's soot too. So it's a very, very simple model. And this is what led to Carl Sagan. That's why he predicted it for the the Kuwait fires, oil fires, because that produced lots of soot. And all this model needs is soot and no rain. And there's very little rain in the Middle East. And he said, well, the soot will go up into the stratosphere. And when it didn't, he said, well, look, there's something wrong with our models. I predicted that the Middle East would be cold for a very long period of time because the soot would loft up into the upper atmosphere and stay there for years. And nothing happened. So this was already being criticized at the time by modelers with a much wider... It originally came from modeling the dust on Mars. So the very, very theoretical ideas. And it was just never grounded in the Earth's atmosphere and how it works and how firestorms work. And they never looked at things like, well, we have wildfires every year. Why don't the wildfires in warm, dry places, why doesn't the smoke just go up into the upper atmosphere, up and up and up and up? And the reason is because the soot particles are too small. So soot particles vary from 0.01 microns all the way up to typically about a few tenths of a micron, and very large ones can reach over half a micron in width, but they're kind of fractal in shape. They're very much like a snowflake, but even more sketchy than a snowflake. And it's very difficult matter trying to warm that up compared to just what the model had, which is just a flat layer. Because the wavelength of light, so when you see visible light, the actual wavelength of that light is a few tens of centimeters across. And not tens of a few tenths of a micron across, not 10 centimeters, ridiculous, sorry. A few tenths of a micron across. And they're about half, it varies from 0.4 to 0.7 microns. And then infrared goes beyond the 0.7 up and up into the infrared. And such large wavelengths couldn't heat up the individual soot particles. And they might do something to this kind of very the fractal shaped, almost like a snowflake, but much more linear kind of a shape. Maybe it could be heated up a little bit, but not very much. And so the whole idea of the soot warming up warm enough so that it would warm the atmosphere all around the soot. It's not enough for the soot to be warm. It has to be so warm that it warms the atmosphere around it. And then the atmosphere then starts rising like clouds do for cumulus clouds on a warm day. And this doesn't happen in real life. And the model was just mistaken. And so Carl Sagan, very honest researcher, and he just said, I've made a mistake. And so that is the background information that I hadn't dug into it in depth. When I did my nuclear winter, it's much easier to do now with the chatbots, even with all the things they get wrong. They can find research like this very easily. So this paper that scared you is based on this idea that soot rises endlessly up into the atmosphere. It was never based on firestorms. So when it came to the discussion between Thun et al. And Weissner et al., Thun et al. Had this result they wanted to be true in order to get their model to work, which was based on this flawed assumption. And so when they said to Weissner, try firestorms, try this, try that, it wasn't because their model has firestorms in it. It was trying to rescue their model, which was based on completely different assumptions. And Weissner could never get the soot up there. And so that puts the whole dialogue in a completely different perspective. I don't think many people know that at all now. And I didn't know it. None of the research that I found clearly explained this at all. They didn't explain this at all. None of the research that I found. And the things that you would find if you ask a chatbot, unless you ask it exactly the right questions, it's not going to turn this up. And so the critics of nuclear winter haven't just gone into the depths of where all this comes from. And Thun et al. Aren't telling anyone. Because they're activists and they just want their model to work. And they're not explaining that it all goes back to this flawed assumption. But it does. And so it all goes back to this idea from the 1983, and if you trace it back, it's a very clear, direct link from that 2022 paper that scared you. They link directly to the 2008 Physics Today's paper. Physics Today paper then talks directly about the 1983 research and gives nothing else to explain how the soot gets into the atmosphere. Then the 1980 research is very technical and most people would just stop at that point. But I managed to get this very clear paper describing 1983 research from an expert, which helped make it clear what the assumptions were. And so that's it. So I hope you can just put this idea to rest, and that this video will help. And it's really just the same thing, same idea that Carl Sagan said. He said correctly that this soot from the Kuwait oil fires didn't stay up in the atmosphere in the way that he said they would. They just rained out. They never went above the level of the rain of weather. And they didn't cause the coldness that he predicted. And that would be exactly the same for all of the wildfires, except for this very rare firestorms, which are extremely difficult to get those to put a substantial amount of soot in the upper atmosphere. And now that Weissner et al. Have dropped out of the discussion, Thun et al. Is not even talking about firestorms anymore, because they've got nobody to challenge them. So anyway, hopefully that'll can help you to get over all this.